we decided to start with just a brief introduction. My name is Patricia George. I'm a finishing PhD student at the University of Leeds. By profession, I am a chemistry and mathematics teacher at the secondary level in the Caribbean. My PhD study looked at students' views of mathematics and Caribbean students' views of mathematics in the Caribbean and how they may have come to have those views of mathematics. And it was the idea for studying that particular issue came from the fact that in the Caribbean there's a perception that students are underachieving in mathematics. So I thought that if I looked at their views, there might be a connection between their views and their eventual performance in mathematics in school leaving exams. From my case study, there was no such connection. And I had to find other ways of trying to explain why students were apparently underachieving in mathematics when they, at least for the student group that I looked at as a group, they had quite positive views of maths. And the conclusion I came to is that students were taking up probably subconscious positions of what they thought people, the significant others in their lives, expected them to do in relation to maths.
Okay, I'm Cathy Smith. I'm at the end of my first year of doing a PhD at London Met, and I'm interested in the experiences of students who are working in the Further Maths network. So they've got two experiences of studying maths. They've got a kind of dependent experience in school with their familiar teachers and with a very structured setup, and they've got a new experience in out-of-school lessons, much more independent study, and with tutors who are new to them. And I was interested in students' choices, the narratives of choice they gave me for deciding to do further maths, why they chose to give it up, whether they chose to carry on with it, and the different positions that might be made available to them in their two different experiences of studying maths, one in school and one out of school in this new system. I'm at the very beginning of my PhD, so this seminar series for me has been about linking my reading with what I've been listening to in the seminar series. So it's had a slightly different function for both of us. We've never met until last week, and we managed to sit at different tables every single seminar. So we've had a really long email conversation. And what we've done really today is just we're going to reproduce snippets of our email conversation. We've got slides that talk about each seminar, but those are kind of our main points. We're just going to gloss over those really with what we really want to say. I think that's it. So I'm going to say mostly Patricia's going to give you the big picture, and I'm going to kind of tell you the things I understood and misunderstood and then understood differently as we went along. It's our style.
For the first seminar at London Met, one of the big ideas I took away from that first seminar was the whole idea of agency. And this was because I was struggling with the notion of agency in my own work because I was using a Bordonian framework, and I was trying to see where did agency fit into that framework and what might it look like in a mathematics classroom. From that day, I came away with what we spoke about on that day did force me to look at what other writers, in more depth, what other writers had said about agency. And so I came away, I did look at Pickering, I looked at Hull and et al., and so on, what they said about agency. But for me, I came away with trivial questions like, what's the adjective for agency? Is it agental? Is it agentic? Is it agentive?
Most of my thinking about these seminars is on the train on the way home. Trains have played a real part in this journey for us, haven't they? And I came away with two ideas from that first seminar. The first was really about these three theoretical strands that have been given to us, because I think the first note I wrote down in the first seminar is kind of nobody wanted to accept the theoretical position that was offered to them, and they all distanced themselves from it. And so I thought, well, what does this say about maths education, that we've got these three perspectives and nobody wants to occupy any of them? And that was, making me think about the same time, because I was thinking about my methodological perspective. And in the afternoon, we did a lot of discussion in that seminar, and I felt that we rehearsed a lot of issues about maths education that actually I'd heard rehearsed over the last 20 years. There were a lot of questions that people asking about maths in context and maths in assessment, but that what we were successful in doing was putting them into the context of maybe relationships, identities and participation. So that made me feel that this was a good way, a useful way of asking and answering questions in maths education. The second thing I got from that seminar was an idea that there might be lots of alternatives. There are different discourses, different figure worlds, different identities that can be offered in maths classrooms. So it started me thinking about alternatives, and alternatives always helps think about change. So it's quite productive.
For the second seminar on pedagogy at Manchester, two main things. From Steve Lerman's presentation, he defined school as middle class, and that had resonance for me for the Caribbean setting, where there are types of schools that exist, and but essentially the same sort of teaching goes on in these schools, so that especially for mathematics, you get this sort of one-size-fits-all genre, which fits better middle-class students than working-class students. I was also, since Cathy brought up the issue of the three theoretical strands, I started paying a little bit more attention to that, which I hadn't done in perhaps the first series. And I was interested in the fact that his presentation got categorized as discursive, because in other readings of his work, I would have thought that his work was more sociocultural, was my feeling. And I then began to question whether discursive could be separated from sociocultural, especially as in, for example, Tansy Hardy's last seminar presentation at Sheffield. She described discursive as not just language, but includes actions, positionings, and so on, which are products of discursive practices. So I began to think of discursive possibly nested within sociocultural and not two distinct strands. Another idea from that second seminar was Tamara Biddy's descriptions that she did of mathematics. Eroticism in mathematics was one, which never two words I heard put together. And the second one was she described problem solving in mathematics as being brought to the edge of danger, teetering on that edge and being able to rescue yourself when you've solved the problem. And that, for me, put a different perspective on mathematics as sort of one of those thrill-seeking adventures. And I think that for teenagers, if mathematics looks like that, they might get more interested in mathematics, like, I guess, bungee jumping. Not that I've ever tried it, but it was just one of the images that came to me on that day. And in that Tamara's presentation, she also said that very often the relationship one forms with maths is intertwined with the relationship one forms with the teacher of mathematics, and perhaps more so than other subject areas. And I kept questioning on that day, why mathematics? And it's a question I came back to over the seminar series. Why mathematics?